Welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust, episode 18, I believe it is. My name is Joel Goldberg, and appreciate you joining if it's live or later on streaming on Facebook, YouTube. We'll also post it on LinkedIn, and hope everyone is having a good, safe, and healthy Thursday. I believe it is Thursday. I believe here in Kansas City, it's not too bad outside at the moment here at midday, but I think we're expecting rain, possibly even snow. It's still Kansas City in April. So even with us being sheltered in place, the weather is kind of like it always has been. You just never know what you're going to get this time of year. I mentioned Enterprise Bank and Trust. Also want to encourage everyone to check out, whether it be on social media at Casey Cattle Company or their website, caseycattlecompany.com. Veteran owned and operated. They're up in Weston, Missouri. Phenomenal guys led by Patrick Montgomery. So all these people that are working up there have served our nation in the military. Wagyu beef, just placed an order the other day. They'll deliver it down to Kansas City and actually all over the country to all 50 states. It's phenomenal. Just put in a big order for ground beef and their new Wagyu beef bacon bratwurst, bacon cheese bratwursts. Haven't tried those yet. I can't wait. I'm getting hungry thinking about that right now. One more thing that I want to mention before we start. I had a message from someone in my network on LinkedIn the other day, and she was saying, "Hey, I'm trying to find all these interviews that you're doing, and I went on to your podcast, but I didn't see them all." And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about this. But the deal is that I've got my weekly podcast, and so that's a kind of a sit down conversation audio version called Rounding the Bases. Just started season 4 a few weeks ago. But I started this whole thing, Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust, because I felt like there were conversations that we should have, that I should have every single day, Monday through Friday, to be able to bring that live with the video. So those are living on YouTube. Those are living on Facebook. And all you have to do is search on YouTube, Rounding the Bases Live, or you can search Joel Goldberg Media and find them. So I'll continue to promote all that, and hopefully everyone can find that. It's a work in progress like everything, but I think it's important right now to get all of this going. I should say I've wanted to have this guest on for a long time. The interesting part is that my guest today is actually my next guest on the audio version of Rounding the Bases, and we have a whole long sit-down interview. It was a long, really, really good conversation that we had at WeWork, but now I feel like there's so much more to talk about in addition to that with what's going on in the community. So it's my pleasure to bring in right now journalist, author, speaker. Let's see, what else can we go with that? Editorial board member of the Kansas City Star, father, family man, on and on, everything. He's a man of many, many hats. My friend, Toriano Porter. Toriano, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Joel. Thanks for having me on, sir.
I knew that you would be dapperly dressed, even amidst this shelter in place, because that's what you do. I mean, you're a fashion guy, too.
I have to represent, man. I have to represent.
I told you in the interview, with all due respect, which is usually a way to proceed a snarky comment, with all due respect for many of my writer friends, you usually blow them away in your attire, except for our buddy Sam Mellinger, because he's always
Sam's always snazzy, right?
Sort of. I hope he's watching, because that's a shout out to him. Toriano, there's a lot I want to talk to you about. And first, I do want to promote for everyone, if you listen to the audio podcast, when it comes out on Monday, it'll be different to this. I mean, the thing that is so interesting to me about Toriano is his story, his life story, and the ability to use that now in so many different ways, whether it is as a mentor to kids in the area and teaching, or whether it is as a journalist. You've been through it all. You're a success story. You're helping others become success stories. So before we get into what's going on in our community right now, and so many fascinating things going on, just take us back a little bit about how you got to here, the shorter version, because the numbers would suggest that growing up where you did in St. Louis, that there's a good chance that you could have ended up somewhere else.
Right.
And yet you're an influencer in this community. You're an inspiration. Tell me where you came from.
Born and raised in South St. Louis, and we spoke about this on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I gave you a little background about my history. But mom and dad were high school dropouts. They had 2 children by the age of 20 years old, and I come from that environment. I come from an environment where there was a lot of guns, drugs, and crime. And trying to navigate that as a youngster was really hard, but I always had this thirst for knowledge and this thirst for education. And I was an athlete as well. So I kind of chased those dreams of being a journalist and being a football player. And it kind of led me, towards this path. Now, it was a lot of bumps in the road. And
Sure.
if people turn into your podcast, I'm sure they'll hear a lot about that. But I just wanted to just kind of make a difference in this thing called life, man. And that's been my goal the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah. And, to me, you've experienced all of it. I mean, it's so interesting to me to hear you say that you got out of that environment in part with books, with reading. You said a thirst for knowledge. Now, you've written books yourself. I find that so fascinating because, I mean, shoot, anyone that's watching right now, by the way, you tell me how much your kids are willing to read. Because if they're reading a lot, I'd like some advice on this one. I know we had my kids when they were younger reading all the time, reading to them and them reading, and now it's like it's all Netflix and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You said a thirst for knowledge, yes, but you still love reading and getting into the books, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. Even from an early age, probably 11, 12, I can remember just reading everything I got my hands on. Magazines, newspapers, encyclopedias were big back then. Just pamphlets, ingredients on milk cartons, whatever I could read. It was always about knowledge, and that's never stopped. It's even to this day, everything is about acquiring knowledge for me. It's just a thirst for learning and a thirst for living, right?
And we'll let people listen more on the podcast, but you have overcome and dealt with so much adversity in your life, including the loss of a loved one, your son. You've got a son right now that's about to bust loose at Rockhurst on the basketball court next year.
Yeah,
and so that's, first off, we all can't wait till their sports back. That's a discussion we've been talking about a lot. But I think that what's really interesting with what you're doing, Toriano, your thirst for all of that, for reading, for writing, is that it is now affecting this community, and you're out telling those stories that you may very well have been a part of growing up over on the other side of the state. And I know you've been here a long time. This is your home. So how do you view your purpose? We're talking right now to so many people on this podcast about what their purpose is, or how they're helping right now, or ways to assist, and interesting stories. You do that every single day with a very strong voice. I believe the youngest member of the Kansas City editorial board too. Yeah. How do you view your purpose in the middle of all this?
Absolutely, Joe. That's a great question. I really take to heart the responsibility that I have as a member of the KC Star's editorial board, but outside of that, also just a member of the community and as a mentor. And like you say, KC is my home now. I've been here 12 years. It'll be 13 in September. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm, living. This is where my roots are now. And I want to make sure that every single kid out here, regardless of demographic, has an opportunity to chase their dreams and goals as I have. So for me, it's giving a voice to the voiceless. I take that responsibility real serious, Joel. And also just knowing these lived experiences I've had and how they relate to everyday life. I grew up in a house where the lights were cut off. You know what I mean? I grew up in a home where drugs were present. I grew up in a home where there was violence. And I had to navigate all of that stuff, and that's my background. I want to make sure these young folks out here have an opportunity to just live good, solid, quality lives. And that translates to what I do every day for a career and a living.
Pretty fortunate too, right? To be able to go to work every single day and partake in something that you are passionate about. Not everyone gets an opportunity to do that. I feel fortunate to also have that same ability. For you right now, what are you seeing in the community in terms of coronavirus, in terms of this pandemic? I mean, I'll say this much, and there's so much out there right now. I mean, this might be a whole different tangent to go off on in a rabbit hole, but there's so much talk about fake news and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I grew up in the world of journalism. I was raised a journalist. I think that there is as good a journalism today as there always has been. It's as important, if not more than ever today, but there's so much out there because anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone has a voice on social media, which is fine. It becomes tough to differentiate. So you are a paid journalist with a voice. How much responsibility do you feel with that?
Man, because there's a lot of noise out here,
Yeah.
and a lot of rhetoric towards fake news and enemy of the people being the media. The media is not the enemy of the people. The enemy is for the people. We are the entity that keeps the powerful in check, that de facto Fort Branch. Now you do have organizations out here or people out here that spread disinformation. You as a person, each individual person has to develop trusted sources. And within those trusted sources, you have to do your own research. As we study the data and the numbers as it relates to the coronavirus, and we know that all the numbers and data are not in, we're starting to see with that data this thing take place, this narrative, this story. And the story is the health disparities that we already knew existed in America is now coming to the forefront. And for me, that's very important that I tell those stories, and we as a board tell those stories.
So what are you hearing right now in the community? Let's start just with coronavirus. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Because, this is, look, I try, and you don't have to do this. I try my best to stay out of politics because in my world, it's not really necessary. I want to appease to all Royals fans. I want to hopefully appeal to all entrepreneurs here and all of that. But the reality of it is, and this doesn't have to be political, by the way, either. It doesn't have to be. The reality of it is there's a lot of injustice. You've been writing about those injustices well before the coronavirus and this pandemic.
Right.
Have these injustices come to the forefront, or is it just yet another sign of the inequity that we have in this community and many others?
Absolutely, it's coming to the forefront. It needs to be part of the solution. Like everyone keeps talking about normal. When are we going to return to normal? After this, on the other side of this is something. We have an opportunity now to change the course of this city, this state we live in. We have an opportunity to provide access, equitable access to health, high-paying jobs, all these things that help your overall health. So what I'm starting to see within the epidemic is what I already knew. There's inequities in this system. It's deep-rooted, and it's going to take time to dismantle. But if we all work together as a common goal to provide equitable access to opportunity, I think we can get there. It's going to take a change of heart, a change of policy, and it's going to just take something different. We cannot continue to do the status quo. And I hope that is what comes out of this, especially here in the KC Metro.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're hearing. First and foremost, how much of your reporting right now is out of the house? Can you even go out there and it's all there?
98%, I would say.
Yeah. Right.
I've made calls. We've done the Zooms and we've done the emails. Pretty much 98% of what I'm doing right now is from the house. I may get out and shoot some B-roll or something, or stretch my legs or get some fresh air, but pretty much everything we're doing is in the house. I haven't met with a source face-to-face in weeks. Haven't seen my colleagues face-to-face in weeks. I actually went to the newsroom this weekend to pick up some documents that I needed. And it was just a strange feeling being inside the newsroom. There's no one there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm a news junkie. I like the hum of the press. I like the sound of the typewriter. I like the phones ringing. I like to hear the police scanner. I missed all that. I'm here in solitude, and it's like I need my blood to pump. So
yeah. I mean, we're all having to adjust to that, right? I mean, I guess I would say that I missed the camera, but I'm looking into this little dot on my computer right now, right here in my house. So I mean, we're all going through that. I just know the importance of sourcing for a journalist and how much easier that is to do in building that rapport face to face. Of course, you've spent years building that rapport with many people in this community who have many different types of jobs, from the politicians to the citizens or whoever it is, right? So let's ask this question. In the underserved areas,
Mm-hmm.
how are those communities? It's not just one, like you can say underserved. You're not talking about one neighborhood. It's a lot of different neighborhoods throughout the Kansas City area.
Uh-huh.
How is this pandemic affecting them, and why are the numbers so much higher?
Okay, I could throw a couple of data points out there that I've uncovered here over the last few weeks. In my hometown where I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, the first 12 coronavirus-related deaths were Black people. The first 12. Here in KC Metro, they released zip code information, council district information, and race of patient information. When they released the council district information, 55 positive cases in coronavirus was found in KC's 3rd district. That's considered the east side of KC, the underserved. In Illinois, 40% of the people who've died in the state of corona-related virus disease have been African American people. They only make up 15% of the state population. Louisiana, 70% Black people dying, 12% of the population. It blew my mind when I read across that. And these numbers are starting to come in, and we're starting to see it even locally here in Wyandotte County. The Hispanic and the Black population have been hit the highest with the coronavirus. The data is telling you the preliminary data is telling you what we already know. There are inequities in these health systems. There's an inequity in America, in our great metro. So how do we come out of this providing access for everyone to have opportunity to live fruitful, healthy lives? And that's what it's about. If we're going to be this great city that I know we can be.
The other part of this too, and a lot of it is, yes, it can be race, but it may just be economics or financial. And so if you have the ability to stay home and by the way, there are plenty of people with money that aren't listening to that. I go to the grocery store and I'm putting a mask on when I have to go, and I'm watching a lot of people, including, they say, that senior citizens need to be more careful. And I'm seeing people walking around of all ages, and certainly senior citizens. And if you didn't know better, there was nothing wrong, and that scares me. I personally, to me, like, I'm not going to get on a soapbox here, but I believe in science. I wasn't very good at it, but I believe in science. I mean, it's just like there are a lot of people that are smarter than me that are saying, don't do this if you want to stay healthy. But if you can't afford to stay home, if you have two choices, stay home and get the power cut off, or not have food for the family, versus I'll risk my health because I need to provide for my family, what choice would you make? I mean, I think about that a lot. How much is that in play?
It's in play every single day. And what I've learned as we've studied this to write on certain things, 30% of your retail and frontline workers, your public-facing workers, are African American. And these are the people that's on the front line, your grocery store clerks, your janitors, the people that we deem essential now. That's probably some of the lower paid people in the country. That's scary, because these people have to go out and put their lives on the line, their health, risk their health, and then they have to come back home. They can't afford the shelter in place. And that's an economic issue, but it also is an equity issue.
It's I mentioned it before. This isn't new, but
Right.
it's perhaps being exacerbated, or it's being pushed to the forefront because of this need to get out there and work. By the way, I'd love to be working right now too, like everyone else. But for the time being, I can hang in there and do this from here. Not everyone has that luxury. I know that you're an optimistic guy. I just, you have an energy about you. You and I've talked about that. And, after we did the podcast, we went over and did something I wish that all of us could do right now. Unfortunately, we're having to do these through Zoom, but you and I went right next door from WeWork to the Corvino Supper Club and had a couple of whiskeys, and I can't wait to do that again in person. But that's not the reality right now. Where are you at in terms of hope and optimism for Kansas City, but also just this country?
Again, because I'm an internal optimist, I think we're going to be okay. Like you said, I believe in science, and if the CDC recommends certain things, then that's what I'm going to try to do. If the governor and the mayor recommend certain things, that's what I'm going to try to do. Everything is about preventing the spread. What we learn is some people are asymptomatic, but they can still spread that disease. You and I can be healthy. We can go out, spread it. Stay home, they say. All right. So I had to go on an essential run right the other day. I just want to be real with you and your viewers. And this probably was 2-3 weeks ago. CDC had just said you have to wear a mask in public. And I went to my local grocery store and I had on a mask. And within 30 seconds of being in that store, I had to take my mask off. I did not feel comfortable as a Black man in America with a mask on inside a retail store at all. 3 weeks later, now today, I don't care. If I'm profiled, I'm profiled, but I'm trying to maintain my health.
Interesting. So that yet is another layer of should you, shouldn't you, right? I mean, and you're now at a point where it's just like, whatever, I don't care.
I am.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So the other thing that's interesting to me, and I follow you on Twitter, and I see everything you put out there and everything the editorial board does. And I've got my subscription to the Kansas City Star, but there are other issues going on. And so I wanted to ask you about that. You do write a lot about homicide and the murders here in Kansas City. That's certainly a problem here. It's a problem over in your hometown where you grew up in St. Louis too. How much has that changed right now?
I'm telling you, Joe, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the stats that have came out here and recently in March in Kansas City, Missouri. More people died from homicide than coronavirus-related deaths. How is that possible when there are fewer people on the street and we are in a stay-at-home order? How is that possible? It then blows my mind. So what we're trying to do is figure out what the department and the police chief Rick Smith is doing to get those numbers down here in April. We're halfway through April. Right now, KC is on pace to have more homicides than they did last year. And I talked to Mayor Quentin Lucas yesterday, the mayor of KC, about this very thing. And I asked him because he had a goal of having 100 homicides or less in 2020. We're not even halfway through the year, and I think we're up to like 43, 44, maybe more than that at this point. It was 43 at the beginning of this week. I usually check it day to day. I didn't check it today, but we may be more. How is that possible? And how are you going to stem it? So they have things in place that they're going to try to implement. They're going to try to, do more intelligent policing, but somehow, some way, that's been lost out here. That's been lost that the homicides continue to, occur even during the pandemic. We as a city, the police board, the police department, Gene Peters Baker at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, the mayor, the city council, we all have to figure out how to address violent crime and reduce homicides. Otherwise, we cannot be the city that we want to be, which is a world-class city.
So any idea why those numbers? It would certainly make sense right now for those numbers to be down. Is it a lack of listening to the social distancing? Is it people are, look, we're all, I don't mean to make light of this, so I hope it's not taken that way. We're all in some form or another stir crazy right now.
I would say many factors. The main one being bad guys have a tendency not to listen to orders. You have that. But you also have this prevalence of guns. Now, I am pro Second Amendment. I'm pro gun, right? But you also have to have laws in place to prevent or discourage possession of weapons. In the state of Missouri, anyone over the age of 18 can legally own a gun without training, without a permit, without a background check. That is a recipe for disaster, especially in this 21st century where there's seemingly in Kansas City, there's violent crime, violent shootings happening. I don't want to say every other day, but it's happening a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's a proliferation of guns. Too many guns in the wrong hands. So if you have untrained shooters with issues in conflict resolution, they're starving, they're hungry, they have no hope. You think they're going to stop shooting during the pandemic? I don't. But you know what is up during this pandemic? Traffic tickets.
Hmm.
Traffic enforcement is up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and this is not a knock on the police department, but you're writing more tickets than you are getting bad guys off the street. That's an issue.
Well, I wonder too. I mean, this is a different time for policing, meaning that, the risks are still there, but there's now an extra risk to that. And that is the actual health and the coronavirus. How is that playing in right now?
I talked to the police department yesterday, the media unit over there, and just kind of asked them a couple of questions about. And I have a great relationship with the Kansas City Police Department, so I don't want your viewers to think I'm anti-police, because when you hold people accountable, it can come off like that. That's my job, is to hold the powerful accountable, whereas the mayor, the police department, the fire department, city council members, anybody that's involved with taxpayer dollars, our job is to hold them accountable for what they do.
Mhm.
I don't want people to think I'm anti-police. So
you also have really good relationships and connections there in which enable you to hold them accountable.
Exactly. And so I was talking to the media unit yesterday, and they put certain things in place. Now, the one concern that we have as a board is that the mask and the gloves are not required. And right now, the police department has 8 officers who tested positive for coronavirus, 65 who are quarantined. And so the question now is, why aren't these guys, these young men and women of the department, not being required to wear masks and gloves when they're out in the field? That's just that's a precaution, a preventive measure. And I believe it's just a matter of choice at this point.
So it's, at least as of right now, it's choice, and I think probably like every other profession, at least those that are working right now, this is a regular adjustment in figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Unfortunately, right now that involves safety on the lines too. Hey, I asked you about hope and being the eternal optimist. Have there been, I hear so many people, I agree with this, by the way, too, that there's so much negative news out there, which, by the way, for someone in your role is tough. I know it could beat you down when you're seeing, so much tragedy and so much devastation and so many bad things. That's tough on the psyche and on the soul. I know it is.
I'm glad you said that. I just want to touch on this a little bit. When I was talking a little bit about my relationship with the Kansas City Police Department, well, about 2 months ago, the media unit over there held a training session for members of the media. Basically, first responders are subjected to a lot of traumatic events. And oftentimes, after the first responders, newspaper reporters are on the scene. So they wanted to offer us this program that helps talk about the trauma related to news. And, I once had a good friend ask me, how do you keep a sane head with all these things you report? I was on a breaking news beat at the time, and I was covering a lot of homicides. And I told them, I just do my job. And you get caught up in that, but it takes its toll. So for me and my colleagues, what we've been trying to do is just every day when we have our morning meetings, we're serious, but we try to keep it light. We tell each other we miss them. We can't wait to see them again, harass them. Not harass, but,
give a hard time.
Yeah, banter back and forth. And so, we're staying light like that. But a lot of it comes down to personal responsibility and finding your spot, finding your mode. For me, that takes on different things daily. But I'm trying to find my mode to keep from reading all the bad news. Like, I have to consume the news to know what to write about and to give people information. But I take that as a grain of salt. I'm reading the news. I'm seeing what's going on. I'm not going to let it get me down.
Yeah.
Because I can control that. I can control how I feel. I'm blessed in that aspect that I can control my emotion and how I feel, and I don't let external things that I can't control get me down. That's the way I do this thing every day.
Well, and I understand that only along the lines, and I think this will make sense to you too, in my world, which is not covering life and death typically, but you go to a game and you're not the fan you used to be because it's work. And so doesn't mean you don't like it, but it means that you're in the press box or you're down in the camera well or whatever it is, and a big home run's hit, no, you don't do that. You're working. Right. So everybody's looking at you like, wait a minute, don't you like this? Don't you get excited? No, this is the next better. This is the next pitch. This is the next thing. You move on. Next story. Next whatever. So it hardens you for better and worse. I believe that the question I wanted to get to was, in terms of eternal optimism, are you seeing stories in the community that give you hope? Are you seeing and talking to people? Because storytelling is effective.
You know what? I've been reading a lot, and not to promote our paper, but a lot in the Star are these stories about these business owners who are shifting their models to produce hand sanitizers. They're shifting their models to offer grocery products now for families who are having a hard time getting out there. Those are the stories that give me hope. The people that are getting their hands dirty, taking chances with their businesses, revamping those businesses on the fly to help the community. That's what it's about. And that's the stuff that gives me hope about this country, this world, but Kansas City, Missouri. The entrepreneurial spirit here, and this is why you have a show. You know about these entrepreneurs out here. They're top notch. They're second to none. One of the reasons I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, is living here and making a home here is that spirit of business owners, entrepreneurs, small business people making their way. It's great. And you have to absorb that.
And we'll wrap it up with that, because amidst all of the negativity, and I agree with you too, like, it's your job to keep up on all of that. I've been telling people, and the cable news networks and the papers wouldn't love me for this, but I say, like, pick what you need, pick what keeps you informed, but don't sit there consuming it all day long, because it will
drive yourself crazy.
Pick up one of Toriano's books and read that instead, right?
I like that. That was great. That was great, Joe.
Right. No, I know. They'll throw that up there again. There's, I think, another book in the works, right? And
Yes, sir.
And then, real briefly for anybody watching too, give us a little rundown on your previous books.
Well, my first project is called The Pride of Park Avenue, right? I was in, it's about life growing up in South St. Louis, trying to navigate the pitfalls of living in an urban community where there's guns, gangs, and crime. A lot of different things I've been through, a lot of different people I've lost due to gun violence. I wanted to write about that experience. I've used that as a tool to reach out to young folks, to get them to continue to dream and not give up on their dreams. And as we talked about in your podcast, I was often derailed. I call it self-sabotage from my dreams, but I was able to get back on point. But I had to go through those things to offer the testimony. My second book is a novel. I wrote a novel. I called it a cute little love story between a girl and a boy and their first little crush. It's set in the summer of 1985 in St. Louis. It runs through the fall of 85, and it ends off with the Royals beating the Cardinals in the World Series. I was a big baseball fan growing up. So the story has a backdrop about baseball, love, girls, and also I was a part of the voluntary desegregation program in St. Louis. I was bused to a predominantly white school as a sixth grader. So I wanted to capture all that in a cute little novel. So I wrote that, and that's called James Cool. And I wrote that because after I moved off Park Avenue, I lived on a street called James Cool Papa Bell, and it's named after the Negro Baseball Museum, the Negro Baseball League great, who has a bus down at the museum at 18th and Vine. And I actually met him when I was like 12 or 13.
Really? Wow.
We walked up there because there was he's a Major League Baseball Hall of Famer and a Negro League Baseball great. He lived on our street. They named the street in his honor. Me and my buddy wanted to go up there and meet him. So that was absolutely cool. So I wanted to write a novel about that experience. And he makes a small appearance in the book.
Cool Papa Bell, the best baseball nickname in the history of the sport.
And you want to know what's crazy? When we moved on that street, me and my brother thought that was the silliest name ever to live on. Why do I want to live on a street called James Cool Papa Bell? I was also 9 years old and I didn't know. I did not know. Yeah. Ignorance is bliss, my friend. Coolest name ever. So hence the name James Cool.
And then there's one in the works right now?
Yeah, working on number 3 right now. It's really a collection of personal essays. I'm going deep with this one, Joel. The working title right now is The Plain Ugly Truth. Plain Ugly Truth. I had to come to grips with some of the ugly truths of my life and trying to navigate my professional world, and when you hit 27, 28 and you're a professional journalist, some of the things I went through to get to where I am today, I wanted to recount that. So I'm working on that as well.
You can hear much more of Toriano's story when my Rounding the Bases audio podcast comes out on Monday, and that'll be there as long as people want to try to listen to it. So it's always up there, and you can find that on iTunes and Spotify, Apple, everywhere that you find your podcasts. And that was a longer discussion, and we covered a lot of ground. Final thing real quick, what was the scouting? I know you played college football at Central Missouri.
Yes,
what was the baseball scouting report on you and some famous guy that was, I think, played with you during the summer that went on to be a pretty good musician?
Well, the scouting report on me coming up was I couldn't hit the curveball. And it turned out to be true. I couldn't hit the curveball. So at the age of 20, I gave up baseball to go to football because I told myself I can't hit the curveball, but I can hit wide receivers and running backs. I can't do that. Then I have a lot of missed tackles in my day. So curveballs. And, I kind of keep this on the low a little bit because I don't want to seem like, I'm making a big deal about it. But
yeah, but I'm asking.
My summer baseball teammate back in the day when I was an amateur baseball player was this famous rapper by the name of Nelly. He was my shortstop. We played on the same, I want to say, amateur baseball team, kind of an AAU type baseball team. It was actually the first African-American based team in the St. Louis Amateur Baseball Association history. So I got that little trivia right there. That was my guy. He was really good, though. He was a really good shortstop. Yeah.
He was playing shortstop. He had to have been one of the better athletes on the team.
Oh, without question. He played football as well. Nelly went to University City. I went to Eureka High. We competed against each other in high school as well. I never lost to U City in my day, though. That's a different story, though.
No. So if Nelly were to suddenly tune into this, just a little bit of bragging rights there.
Right.
Hey, I appreciate you doing this. You can find Toriano's work at torianoporter.com and much more than that, certainly.
And make sure you keep in mind for your viewers that subscriptions right now to KC Star are imperative. I beg of you to subscribe to your local paper. Give us a chance. Trust that we're going to bring you the news that you need to get you through not only through this virus, but day to day and making sure we're keeping people accountable. So just subscribe. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to go there, not as well as you just did, but support that local journalism, support those local papers. It's so easy to do nowadays. So you can log in, subscribe right online, or get the paper delivered to you too. So you can do that. Just get on the KC Star and find their website, and that is easy to do. You'll see Toriano's work. You'll see the editorial board. If the editorial board has a article or a column out there, there's a good chance that Toriano either wrote it or was involved in something with it, or certainly his colleagues were. So keep up the great work. I'm excited for the podcast to release on Monday, and hope everyone will check that out. Stay safe, my friend, and I can't wait till that whiskey in person happens sometime soon.
Thanks, Joe. Have a great one. Thank you.
All right, you too. Stay safe. Toriano Porter, my guest on this one. Really informative and important information about our community and so many of the stories that Toriano is writing about and talking about. And we didn't even get into his mentorship and the influence that he has on kids here in this community. But again, you can hear that beginning Monday on Rounding the Bases. Just jump on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. Appreciate their support, and of course the support of the KC Cattle Company. Again, you can check out their website. They will deliver to you down here in Kansas City. Veteran owned and operated. Thank you all. Have a safe Thursday, and we'll see you back here for another edition of Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust, tomorrow on Friday. See you, everyone.